You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. Before I get into this, I want to tell you something kind of funny. I fully prepared to start with football and then go to hockey. I was going to recap all of yesterday's stories today in the NHL. But then I thought about it. Is it really the best course of action to recap yesterday's NHL stories today when there are about 50 million NHL transactions today? I promise you, you're not gonna remember the stories from yesterday if I talked about them. You'd say, what is this guy talking about? I don't remember that. And quite frankly, I don't care about it. My attention's somewhere else. So that, coupled with the fact that I'm going to do a full NHL free agency breakdown tomorrow, that will be the regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show, meant that I did kind of change my approach a little bit. I'm just going to do football, baseball. That's it. So, in those two sports, the biggest story is Xavier Howard's trade request. He went public with it on Instagram. He wants out of Miami. Basically, Howard's issue is that he signed an extension in 2018. He has, to use his words, significantly outperformed that deal. So he wanted the Dolphins to guarantee more money. He didn't want a new contract. He just wanted more guaranteed money. The Dolphins said no. That's why he wants out. The thing is, though, if you look at Xavier Howard's contract, it's incredibly fair. In terms of AAV, he's the 6th highest paid corner in the NFL. In total value, he's the 4th highest paid corner. Same thing in terms of total guaranteed money. When he signed that contract, he became the highest paid corner in the NFL. So, are you underpaid now? If you want to make that argument, you can. But that's the nature of the beast. We saw it with quarterbacks for a long time before Patrick Mahomes broke everything. This quarterback got this amount, so this quarterback had to get more than that, and then the next quarterback had to get more than that, and more than that, and more than that. That's how these NFL contracts work. It's all about when you're set to hit the open market. That is the nature of the beast. you signing a contract in 2019 means that all the other great corners that are going to sign in 2020 are going to get more than you. Yeah, Jalen Ramsey's going to get more than you. Yeah, Marlon Humphrey's going to get more than you. Same thing with Tre'Davious White. Same thing with Darius Slay. And the same thing with your teammate Byron Jones. I don't know if this is allowed in the CBA, but there is something in contract law called a favored nation clause. Generally, you see it more in terms of trading between countries, but it can exist in an individual's contract. Basically, think of it like this. If you sign a contract with a law firm, and that contract has a favored nation clause, that means that the law firm agrees to pay you equal to or more than its current highest paid employee. But there's another benefit to a favored nation clause. If that law firm brings in another attorney and he signs a contract for more than what you initially agreed to make, that favored nation clause means that your salary will go up. With a favored nation clause, you are guaranteed to always be tied for or have sole possession of the distinction of being the highest paid employee. I don't know if the NFL CBA allows favored nation clauses. If it does, I'm sure a lot of players would have them. You can't have too many, though, because then these salaries would go crazy. Even more crazy than they already are. The point is that Xavier Howard doesn't have a favored nations clause. So the Miami Dolphins are under no obligation to adjust his contract. This guy signed a contract that made him the highest paid corner in the NFL just 2 years ago. Now you want sympathy that you're no longer the highest paid corner in the NFL? In the immortal words of Justin Timberlake, cry me a river. You'll get no sympathy from anyone in that regard. And to the notion that the Dolphins haven't dealt with you in good faith, that you don't feel valued, that you feel disrespected by them, do you want them to hire a butler to wipe your ass for you? I mean, come on. They made you the highest paid cornerback in the NFL 2 years ago. Bear in mind, they had traded everyone not that long ago. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Laramie Tunsil. There were Xavier Howard trade rumors. The Dolphins didn't do it. They made a commitment to you. They made you the highest paid corner in the NFL. What more do you want? I'm a Jets fan. I hate the Dolphins, and I'm furious about this. I can't imagine what Dolphins fans are feeling right now. I understand that we're living in an era of player empowerment that we've never had before in sports. And I understood where some of these players were coming from. I understood where Aaron Rodgers was coming from. if Bradley Beal and Damian Lillard were to make trade requests, I'd understand their logic. But each case of a trade request is different. Just like every player is different, you've got to take these trade requests with a little bit of a grain of salt. You can't just say, this player signed a contract, he should honor it, as a blanket statement, just like you can't say that if this player wants out, the team should do right by him, as a blanket statement. Every situation is different. There is no way on earth that you can look at Xavier Howard's situation and come to any other conclusion than he's acting like a spoiled brat. And it's a shame because I respect the talent that Howard is. Led the NFL in interceptions last year with 10. Was the second best corner in the NFL last year, according to Pro Football Focus. He had an 87.3 overall grade. You know, it's kind of interesting. In 2018, Xavier Howard led the NFL in interceptions. That's what led to him getting that mammoth contract from the Dolphins. 5 years, $75.25 million. In 2019, Howard was not good. He only had one interception. He had a 56.5 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. He got hurt. He only played in 5 games. That's not a good year. How do you think Howard would have taken it if the Dolphins had approached him after the 2019 season, less than a year after signing that extension, and they said to him, you know what? We want to redo this deal a little bit. We want you to take a pay cut. Howard would be furious. That's in essence what he's doing here. If after a great season, you think you have the right to renegotiate your contract, then by your logic, if you have a bad season, the Dolphins have a right to renegotiate your contract. You're not the only one who can renegotiate contracts. Like, here's the thing. If you're thinking about trading for this guy, if you're the Saints, if you're the Cowboys, whoever, do you want this guy? You can sign him to an extension that'll pay him more than Jalen Ramsey. That's all well and good. But if in a year or two, some corner comes around and eclipses Ramsey's contract and Howard's new contract, don't you think Howard will come to you and say, hey, I want to be paid more than this guy? You can't tell me that's not a possibility. No one's doubting the talent that Xavier Howard is. He's one of the best corners in the NFL. But to want more money after the Dolphins gave you the richest contract for a corner in NFL history? No, that doesn't work for me. I don't care that other corners came around and beat you. You should be thankful that they did. They used your contract as a benchmark to set themselves up and their families up for success for the rest of their lives. You should be honored by that. All in all, I lost a lot of respect for Howard here. I'm a Jets fan, so I'm happy that the Dolphins are having this dysfunction. But if I'm just looking at this as a football fan, this leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Moving on now to the Colts, making Braden Smith the second highest paid right tackle in the NFL, as they signed him to a 4-year extension worth up to $72.4 million. 42 mil of that is guaranteed. This is an outstanding move for the Colts. Smith is one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the NFL. Quentin Nelson gets all the headlines because he was taken in the first round of the 2018 draft by the Colts with one of the picks that the Jets traded to move up to get Sam Darnold. There was more to that trade, though. The Jets kicked in 3 second-rounders. 2 in 2018 and 1 in 2019. The 37th overall pick, one of the picks that the Jets traded, their own second-rounder, was used on Braden Smith. So with 2 of the picks that the Colts got from the Jets, they drafted 2 outstanding young offensive linemen. The Indianapolis Colts provided the blueprint for how to build an offensive line in the NFL. You do it through the draft. You don't do it through free agency. Smith is a big part of what the Colts do. He's gotten better and better every year he's been in the NFL. Last year he had an 80.1 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. He's one of the best right tackles in the NFL. Is he the second best right tackle in the NFL? Probably not. I'd put guys like Ryan Ramczyk, Taylor Moton, and Jack Conklin ahead of him. But the Colts had to keep Smith around. He would have gotten this in free agency. There's no question about that. So look, great deal by the Colts. It makes perfect sense for both sides. Maybe it's a little bit of an overpay if I'm nitpicking, but I can't get on the Colts for what they did here. They had to keep Smith around. Moving on now to Randall Cobb returning to the Packers. We don't know what the Packers traded to get Cobb, but we know that he is returning to where it all started for him. You've got to keep Aaron Rodgers happy. It's obviously a very tenuous situation between him and Green Bay. If Rodgers says that he wants Cobb back, see if the Texans are willing to trade him, you've got to do it. Is Cobb the player that he once was? Absolutely not. He'll never be a 1,000-yard receiver again. He'll never have double-digit touchdowns again. But he's still a good player. Last year for the Texans, he caught 38 passes for 441 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's not bad. Look, there's no question that the Packers wide receiver core needed help. They added a good wide receiver. Not a great one. But if Rodgers likes him and he was comfortable with him, yeah. You've got to bring him back. Next up, call the Bills. See if they'll trade you Jake Kumaro. This move makes sense for the Packers. It helps keep Rodgers happy. It's hard to go too in-depth on this move since we have no idea what the Packers gave up to get him. But I'm sure it wasn't a lot. You've got to do everything in your power to win a Super Bowl this year, or else there's no chance that Rodgers is coming back. Good job by the Packers. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And I'll start with a really interesting trade from my beloved Yankees. They traded Luis Cessa and Justin Wilson to the Reds for the proverbial player to be named later. A few thoughts went through my head when I saw this. The first one was that Brian Cashman is going to start the sell-off. This is going to be the first of multiple trades that Cashman makes to build this Yankee team for the future. But then as I was reading the comments from other people, they said that this is just the start of a big trade. The Yankees are clearing a couple roster spots. They're clearing a little salary. This is the build-up to something big. Then I looked to see how much money Cessa and Wilson still need to be paid. Cessa's due about $400,000 for the rest of this season. Wilson's due about $1 million. So the Yankees only saved $1.4 million with these trades. Is that going to be the be-all, end-all towards them adding a big piece at the trade deadline? If it is, then Hal Steinbrenner should be ashamed of himself. That he's going to let less than $1.5 million be the difference between adding and not adding a big piece to this Yankees team. If he thinks that the Yankees can make the playoffs this year and go on a big run, Brian Cashman sold him on that, then yeah, pay the extra $1.4 million. Come on, that's absurd. Your father would do that. You probably have $1.4 million in your dresser. I mean, I'll say this. At this very moment, Brian Cashman's doing what I want him to do. He's selling off a couple noteworthy pieces. Cessa's a really good reliever. Went 3-1 this year with a 2.82 ERA. It's kind of funny. You know how the Yankees originally got him? They traded Justin Wilson to the Tigers for him and Chad Green. Now Cessa and Wilson are being traded together. And every Yankees fan should be happy that Justin Wilson is gone. This guy was terrible for the Yankees, had a 7.5 ERA. Presumably the Yankees included Cessa in this deal to entice the Reds to take on Wilson's contract. But I'll say this, it wouldn't stun me if Wilson turned it around with the Reds. We all know that he's had success before. And the Reds have good luck with Yankees rejects. Cough, cough, Sonny Gray. So they could turn Wilson into something good again, just like they did with Gray. I'll say this, though. It's interesting that they're buying. They have no chance of making the playoffs. They're 6 games behind the Padres for the second wildcard spot, and they're 7 games behind the Brewers in the NL Central. They're not making the playoffs. This trade doesn't make a lot of sense for them. They got a good reliever in Sessa, and if Wilson works out for him, maybe they can get him for next year, but at this very moment, I don't get this trade for them. And I can't evaluate it from the Yankees' end because I have no idea what they're going to do in the next 48 hours or so. I've got a hedge. I can't say that either team won this trade. I'm sorry, there are too many moving parts. Moving on now to the Mariners stealing Tyler Anderson away from the Phillies. Jacob, what are you talking about? Tyler Anderson was a Pirate. You got your Pennsylvania teams mixed up. No, I didn't. At 4:06 p.m., Jason Mackey of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette tweeted that a Tyler Anderson trade to the Phillies was finalized. In exchange, the Pirates would get Abraham Gutierrez and Christian Hernandez. A little later, though, we found out that the deal hadn't been finalized. The Pirates were concerned about Christian Hernandez's medical report. Evidently, the Phillies couldn't rework the trade, so the Pirates sent Anderson to the Mariners instead for Carter Binns and Joaquin Tejada. And this is an interesting move for the Mariners. They already have 3 lefty starters in Yusei Kikuchi, Justice Sheffield, and Marco Gonzalez. Although granted, Sheffield's hurt right now, but he's going to come back at some point. Why add a 4th? I'd have rather the Mariners added a righty starter. But I'll say this, there aren't any great starters available. We've heard Jose Berrios' name mentioned, but I wouldn't bet the rent on him being traded. Madison Bumgarner's name has been mentioned a little bit. He's not having a good year. We haven't heard anything about the Rockies starters, surprisingly. We haven't heard anything about the Marlins starters, surprisingly. There just aren't many great starting pitching options out there. A lot of teams want starters, but there aren't many to be had. I mean, there's a real possibility that Anderson could be the best starter dealt in advance of the trade deadline. And all due respect to Tyler Anderson, he's having a decent season. 4.35 ERA. And he's 5-8 with a bad Pirates team. That's not bad. Neither one of those stats are bad. But you don't want him having that distinction of being the best starter moved at the deadline. They did get an interesting prospect in Carter Binns. You don't need to know anything about Joaquin Tejada. He's a schmagegi. Binns reminds me a lot of Gary Sanchez. Incredible raw power. Not going to hit for a high average. Not the greatest defensive catcher in the world, but that power bat makes you drool. But all in all, I will say that the Mariners won this trade. Like I said, Anderson may be the best starter traded in advance of the deadline. We've heard Max Scherzer's name mentioned also. I should have mentioned him earlier, but Scherzer's name has been bandied about. The thing is, though, I'm not sold on the Nationals trading him. And he has a no-trade clause. Could Scherzer be traded? The answer is yes, but I wouldn't bet the rent on it. The Mariners did make another trade, and it's incredibly confusing. They traded Kendall Graveman and Rafael Montero to the Astros for Abraham Toro and Joe Smith. It's bad enough that those guys play in the same division, but those two teams, the Mariners and Astros, are actually playing each other right now in a series. So all they had to do is just walk across the field. This trade makes absolutely no sense for the Astros. Kendall Graveman has been one of the best relievers in baseball this year. He should have been an all-star. He's 4-0 with a .82 ERA. I didn't misspeak. That's his ERA. And you just gave him away within your division? The biggest hole that the Astros had was in that bullpen. Graveman's going to go a long way towards shoring that up. And here's the kicker for me. The Mariners are only one game behind the Athletics for the second wildcard spot. The two guys who they got, Toro and Smith, I don't want to say they're schmageggies, but they're not going to do much for the Mariners. This doesn't help the Mariners for this year. I'm not an Abraham Toro fan. He's done nothing in the majors. Okay, he had a pinch hit home run for the Mariners last night. I get that. That's a nice story. I can promise you he's not going to do that every night. And Joe Smith has been dreadful this year. Pitched a scoreless inning last night. Hallelujah. You're not going to see too many of those. For the Astros, he went 1-1 with a 7.48 ERA. And are we sure that Rafael Montero can't be fixed? He put together some good years for the Rangers. The Astros got the two best players in this deal by far. The Mariners drastically hurt their playoff chances for this year. Trading for Tyler Anderson doesn't make up for this trade. This is an egregious trade by the Mariners. It makes literally no sense. It makes the Astros a lot scarier, though. There's no question about that. Moving on now to the Rockies, trading Michael Givens to the Reds in exchange for Noah Davis and Case Williams. Don't look now, but the Reds did acquire 3 decent relievers. Sessa's more than decent. It's not impossible to think that Justin Wilson could turn it around in Cincy. And Michael Givens is having a great year with the Rockies. He's 3-2 with a 2.73 ERA. This doesn't really help their playoff chances a ton for this year, but hey, their bullpen will be good down the stretch. That's pretty much all I can say. They didn't give up too much to get Givens. I'm not the biggest Noah Davis fan in the world. I just don't see him as a starter going forward. He really only throws 2 pitches, a fastball and a slider. He's working on a curveball, but it's really not that good. With only 2 pitches, your only chance of making it in the bigs is as a reliever. And Case Williams is only noteworthy because the Rockies literally just traded him. They traded him along with Jeff Hoffman for Robert Stevenson and Jameson Hannah. Now they're hitting the undo button on that a little bit. Williams has some potential. He's really young. He's only 19, and he's pitching in single A. That's very difficult. I wouldn't bet the rent on him making it in the majors, but it's not impossible. I'm not giving up on him. I like this trade for the Rockies. It makes sense. You got a guy in Davis who could be a good reliever for you, and you got a guy in Williams who could be a good starter for you. Michael Givens wasn't going to do you any good. The Rockies aren't making the playoffs this year. Neither are the Reds. I don't care how good their bullpen gets. They've dug themselves too deep a hole. Moving on now to the Marlins, trading Starling Marte to the Athletics for Jesus Luzardo. You may be thinking, wow, that's a surprise that the Athletics would take on Marte's contract. He's due just over $4.5 million. The Athletics really don't take on those types of contracts. They don't need to. The Marlins are paying the entirety of Marte's salary. The Athletics won't have to pay Marte a penny. All they did was trade Jesus Luzardo, and they got a really, really good center fielder. It's kind of interesting to think about this. Could the Yankees have done something like this? Could they have traded a young gun of theirs and said to the Marlins, pay all of Marte's salary? I could have been talked into that as a Yankees fan, even though I've said, don't buy this year. If you can get Marte without needing to pay him anything, that would go a long way towards helping this Yankees team out. It would keep open the possibility of another trade. And you take a look at the Athletics, Marte fits them perfectly. Steven Piscotty has done nothing for them. He's hitting .201. So you can move Ramon Laureano to right, a position that he has some experience at, not a ton, but some. And Marte slots in at center. This is perfect. The Athletics so far have won this deadline, trading for Chafin and trading for Marte. It doesn't get much better than that. Marte's hitting .306 this year. He has 22 steals. He has a .407 on base percentage. He's a really, really good player. The question is it worth giving up the former top prospect, Jesus Luzardo? Before the 2020 season, this guy was a consensus top 15 prospect in all of baseball. He has not put it all together this year. He went 2-4 with a 6.87 ERA. The Athletics sent him back down to the minors. He has struggled in Las Vegas. Is Luzardo going to bust? That's a fair question. The answer is it's possible. It makes sense for the Marlins to take a chance on him. Okay, if Luzardo figures it out, you've got a really, really good pitcher on your hands. But there's a strong chance that he's never going to figure it out. This is a great trade for the Athletics. It sets them up really well for postseason success. It'll be interesting to see if the Yankees respond to any of this. I don't think they should. I don't think this is their year. But I'll say this. If the Yankees really think that they can make a go at this thing, they can't just stand pat. The teams around them have gotten better. The Rays got Nelson Cruz. The Athletics got Chafin and Marte. The Mariners got Anderson. I don't want the Yankees to buy, but if they think that they can make the playoffs, that's what they're going to need to do, unfortunately. NHL free agency recap comes your way tomorrow. I'm going to go team by team, breaking down what everyone did. Hopefully there aren't any huge baseball trades. Let's save them all for tomorrow night. Because on Friday, the first part of the show will be about the NBA draft. The next part will be about MLB trades. But if there is a huge trade that breaks tonight or tomorrow morning in baseball, there's a chance that I'll talk about it tomorrow. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.